I want to tell a personal story that I've actually been working on writing about it and gathering a lot of photographs to jog my memory. And it goes from 1962, when I was 12 years old, until 2015. This summer I turned 65, so that's a good long spread of time, involving one activity that was very important to me then and now. And the reason I think I want to tell this story is because it applies directly to Creators Publishing and Sumner Books and the new business that we're going to build. Because what I've learned through this experience, the lessons, I think we can apply directly to building our business. In fact, if I were to tell the story of building Creator Syndicate from scratch, I noticed as I was writing this and preparing it, it's exactly the same principles of success that led to our achievements. And same with any other category. So let me take you back to, it's probably about February of 1962, probably before most of your parents were born, but I was 12 years old in suburban Chicago riding my bicycle. And it had just thawed out, from one of those brutal winter months. And so I was riding my bicycle in a town called Wilmette, which is suburban Chicago. And there's a place called the Linden Street L. The L is in Chicago what in other cities they call a subway, but it's elevated through much of the city. And so it's called the L, and the last stop on the L on the North Shore is the Linden Street L in Wilmette. So I rode my bike over because they had a great newsstand. And I was always interested in looking at the covers. And so I was looking at covers of Boxing Illustrated, and this is before the WWF, but wrestling, and these guys like Gorgeous George would have, blood flowing off their faces, and I thought it was so cool, these gladiators slugging it out. And then all of a sudden, I saw this bodybuilder, which I'd never seen before, and I thought, wow, what is that? And I bought the magazine. It's dated March 1963, so I turned 13 that August. I was born in August, so I was 12 years old in March 19, and so this was February, a month earlier before the magazine came out. March 1963, and it was 35 cents, and I dug into my pocket and bought the magazine and said, I'm going to look like this guy. That is my goal. Nothing's going to stop me. I took it home, went up to my room, I started reading, I read every word. I bought a bunch of other magazines, muscle magazines. Then I discovered there was a fellow in downtown Chicago who was a Mr. America competitor. His name was Rock Stonewall. His real name was Jesse Stonewall, but he changed it to Rock. Stonewall wasn't enough. He needed to reinforce it. And so I asked my parents, I said, because remember, I'm 12. I didn't drive or whatever. So I asked my parents, I said, can we go down, do you know where this is, 28 East Van Buren Street? And they said, yeah, that's near, my mom said, that's near where your father works. I said, well, can we go down and meet him? So she said, all right, and they arranged to have dinner on a Friday night, so she and I drove into the city. We picked up my dad at his office at the Chicago Sun-Times and went over to 28 East Van Buren Street. And we met Rock Stonewall, who at the time I think was about a 25-year-old vitamin health food store manager of the health food store. And Rock could not have been nicer. That's what he looked like then. This was from a magazine. I think this was the picture I had seen in the magazine. He was at a department store. He took off his shirt and stood with these York barbells, and that's all natural. That's from hard work, and those are natural muscles. No steroids, no chemicals. And he became my hero. And so I used to go downtown every Saturday to hang out with Rock Stonewall. Now next door to Rock was a building with a gym called Triumph Gym. And I remember going over there with my parents, and they had this old-fashioned kind of elevator where you slide the things open, and it's the three of us could barely fit in it. We go up 4 flights of stairs, four stories, and it took longer than it would have taken us to walk. And the thing opens, and it's like almost kind of like an apartment, living room atmosphere, but it was a gym. And it was a Friday night, and all these guys are working out, and I thought, how could anybody enjoy a Friday night more than to work out in this gym? I mean, this was heaven to me. So I then started reading Iron Man magazine, Muscle Builder and Power, Mr. America, and you know, I remember my mom saying, thank goodness for these muscle magazines, publishers like Joe Weider, because they taught Rick to read. He became a voracious reader. I would read every classified ad, everything. And so when, you know, by the time 10 years later, or however many, 10 years later, I was graduating Phi Beta Kappa from college, and she was saying, it's all because of those muscle magazines that got you started on reading. It's an interesting story. I had lunch with Joe Weider, who was one of the publishers, one of the major publishers in the bodybuilding movement, and we syndicated his column, as you know. And so I was having lunch with him a few years before he died. He died, I think, at age 93. And I told him that story about how my mom said, you know, we have you to thank, Joe, for Rick becoming such a voracious reader. And he said, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger's mom told a similar story. When Arnold was like 14 in Graz, Austria, and he would get the American muscle magazines, and he didn't speak English. And so he could see the pictures, you know, but he'd run over to his friends who could speak English and say, what does it say? What does it say? I've got to learn English. I've got to learn how to read. So to read his own muscle magazines, Arnold really worked at that. And Joe had a great influence on both of us for our reading skills and our language skills. I worked out through age 12, age 13, age 14, very hard. It was like, it was my whole life. I got everybody in my grade school to work out. I was like an evangelist for working out. I went to my first bodybuilding contest and saw this fellow, Bill Sino. He was about 22 or 23. Remember, if I'm 13 at this time, 23 feels like, you know, another world. If you're 13 and you're with a 23-year-old. And he was just a monster. He was so strong and such a nice man. As I understand, I Googled him, and I think he's a high school football coach as a career. Then I met this fellow named Sergio Oliva. He became known in bodybuilding as the Myth. He was from Cuba. He was a professional Olympic weightlifter, and he defected from communist Cuba and moved to Chicago. And when I met him, it was at his very first posing exhibition. He hardly spoke any English. He had a translator, and he could not have been nicer to us boys. I was with a few friends, and we were about, like I say, 13 years old. And Sergio went on. He became a beloved Chicago policeman. In bodybuilding, he was known as the Myth because nobody could beat him. Nobody could touch him. Now, originally, there were two factions in bodybuilding, the AAU and the IFBB. And the AAU was the Amateur Athletic Union, and they promoted weightlifting with bodybuilding as an afterthought. The Weider brothers, Joe and Ben Weider, promoted bodybuilding first. And the AAU in that time was accused of racism, especially in the kinds of sports where it's subjective, like where you have to evaluate who has the most muscle or who looks the best or whatever. It's not who could lift the most. And when he entered the Mr. America contest in Chicago in 1964, which I attended, I think he was placed 7th or 8th, which was ridiculous. He should have been first. So he left the AAU, joined the IFBB, and won Mr. America, Mr. Universe, Mr. Olympia, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, his big goal was to topple Sergio Oliva because it just wasn't considered possible. And Arnold, the first time they competed, lost. But he was a very smart guy. He analyzed what Sergio did right, what he did wrong, and he kept training hard, and eventually overtook him, and Arnold became Arnold. But Sergio was up at that level, and I met him like in his very first posing exhibition, and like I say, he couldn't have been nicer. As time went on, I remember like my 8th grade graduation present was my dad gave me a membership to Triumph Gym for the summer. So every day I would take the L downtown and work out at Triumph Gym. I met another kid about my age named Rocky. I don't know whatever happened to him, but he was really a nice guy. And we worked out hard together. And then we'd go down to this $1.19 steakhouse and have steak and garlic toast and baked potato and green beans or a salad. And I just felt like such a big guy, you know, lifting weights and getting blood flowing through my system, and because remember, I forgot to say, I was very small to begin with. And that's one of the reasons I think people become bodybuilders. I remember talking to a fellow who's a psychiatrist who was a big bodybuilder and a great guy at the old World Gym. We were standing outside and I said, why do you think people become competitive bodybuilders? And he said, I think it's overcompensation. They start out small and they want to get big. He said, I don't think it's an accident that Arnold's father was a police chief and Lou Ferrigno's father was in the police, and they want to measure up, you know, and get big. And that made a lot of sense to me. I remember, well, just training hard and enjoying this and having surrounding, I had created a home gym down in the basement of my parents' house. And this is what I was living for. But as I got older, what happened was I lost control of my schedule. I know, I wanted to go to high school downtown Chicago because that way I could work out at Triumph Gym. And my mother was an Italian Catholic, and there's no way that she would let me go to any school in downtown Chicago unless there was a religious reason. Well, I found out there was a seminary called Quigley North. So I said, oh, I'll become a priest. So I went downtown every day so I could go to Triumph Gym and see Rock Stonewall every afternoon. The problem was at Quigley, you know, I was on the swimming team and we did wrestling, we did soccer, we did track, baseball, and so I couldn't do that. I wasn't allowed to. I was only, you know, 14, 15, and that was very, very frustrating. The summer of 1965, my mom took all 8 kids to France, and we were in Cap Ferret, which is at the very south of France, about an hour south of Bordeaux. And I did a lot of freehand exercises and went to the beach and tanned a lot, but there was no gym, no way for me to lift weights. So I would just read these muscle magazines and dream of what I wanted to do. Then we come back to suburban Chicago, and I transferred to Loyola Academy in Wilmette. I went there. I remember my frustration was I was 15 years old, and I was late in going through maturity or puberty, and I was small. And here I had done all this work for so many years. And like I'd stand next to Bill Murray, the famous actor and comedian. He was a classmate. And he was kind of a bully. He was he was probably 6 feet 1, 175, 180 pounds, lots of muscle because he was on the football team. I was 5 feet tall, 105 pounds, maybe 115 if I put on extra clothes. And here I had been and so I got really discouraged. Murray I remember he was very funny in high school. I didn't know him well. One of my best friends was Luke Matthews, and Luke and Bill were super close. So the extent to which Murray was a bully, Luke made sure he never bullied me. But still, I think unconsciously I was thinking, this is crazy. I've done all this work and there's no result. Even though now, if I look at pictures of myself then, I think, well, no, I really had made progress. If only somebody had looked at that and given me proper guidance, and if somehow I had been in the right environment. All right, now then I go about my life. I went to a couple of other high schools, finally got it together, went to college, business school, and was succeeding in business and succeeding in journalism as a reporter and editor. And then I was hired at the Los Angeles Times Syndicate. I started a family, but I wasn't working out hardly at all. And I remember thinking as I was like around 30, you know what? I had this dream to look like that fellow, his name is Guy Mirzak, he's from France. And I never did it. And you know, that's not like me, especially me as an adult. If I set a goal, I reach it. And then I set the new goal, then the new goal. And when you do that, you build a feeling of confidence. Nothing can build confidence like that. So I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back to it and really get into bodybuilding. But the problem was I was, at this point, vice president, general manager of the Los Angeles Times Syndicate. I had a big job. So I couldn't just be a gym rat or, hang out and experiment. So I thought, okay, I'm smart enough to figure out that I need help. And in those days, we didn't have personal trainers. This was like 1981. But I saw an ad, I bought a muscle magazine, and I saw an ad, one of Weider's, and the ad was by Franco Colombo. And he said, come to me, I'm a chiropractor, Oh, this was back, I forgot this. This was back when I was like 13 years old, and I got my picture and story written up in a magazine. There you go. All right, so this is what I looked like when, like that's Sarah. And we were in Palm Springs, and I mean, I didn't look that bad, but I didn't look great. I mean, I certainly didn't look like a bodybuilder, like I had set in my goal. So now I meet Franco Colombo. He's one of the strongest men who ever lived. He's got a nice dog, too. And huge muscles and everything else. And he was a chiropractor. And his office was in Westwood. And he said, we design bodybuilding programs. So I made an appointment, July 31st, 1981. And I went in and saw Franco. And he was just a monster. I didn't realize he was just about to win the Mr. Olympia contest. But he said, okay, take off your shirt. I was really embarrassed. So I took off my shirt and I looked like, you just saw. And he said, okay, let me design a program. So he wrote out a program. And then he wrote out a dietary thing. His basic diet thing was, he was Mediterranean. He's from Sardinia. So he says, eat lots of fish, lean meats, pasta, fruits, vegetables, nuts. And he said, if it's wrapped, don't try to avoid it. If it's in a can, try to avoid it. If it's processed, try to avoid it. If it's whole foods, eat that. I mean, that's healthy. So it wasn't anything, like I remember once saying, what do you think about bacon and eggs? And he said, yeah, a little good. But, I mean, a little bit is okay. He said, don't eat just egg whites, eat the whole egg, because that's how the yolk actually is the good cholesterol. And I think studies since then have proved him right. And there was a long period where a lot of nutritionists were saying that's not true, but I think now the good fats, people recognize coconut oil, olive oil, egg yolks, they have some properties of good fats, certainly nuts. So I saw Franco, he gave me the routine, and I started doing it. And it was about an hour and a half, 4 days a week. And I signed up at Gold's Gym. This was the one in Venice. And it was okay, it was pretty good. I met some interesting guys. I remember talking to one guy, Dan Duchesne, who couldn't have been nicer. This was like at 5 in the morning. I was like Rick Newcombe. I go in really early. And Dan was telling me, look, if you want to make progress, you got to get on steroids. There's no other way. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. And I'm working with Franco Colombo, and he didn't mention anything about steroids. And Dan said, I'm writing a book about it, and it's the easy way. You can do it in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. You'll look like Mr. Universe. I said, no, I just want to work out. So, but I like Dan. He could not have been nicer. I've read about him on Google. He actually wound up in prison for selling steroids, and then he died young from some kind of something. It's a sad story because you could never meet a sweeter guy who was well-intentioned. I mean, his whole thing was, this is scientific and it works and so on. And I said, no, it's not for me. All right. After about 2 or 3 months of dieting and working out, I went back to see Franco, my personal trainer. Because when I think of personal trainers today, they stand and they watch every set and every rep, and I never really understood that. I've talked to one, some of you may know him, Mike Myers. He told me that, I said, well, why do you have to watch them do every rep? And he said, it's amazing. Like, I'll have somebody with dumbbells, and I'll say, do dumbbell presses, or I might have them do a little arc. And he said, they go like this. And I said, how do they go like this? That's so unnatural. But he said, they do. And so, anyway, but Franco didn't believe in that. He believed in just a good program, and the person should be a good student. All right, so I go back to Franco. He says, all right, take off your shirt. And his eyes, he was very expressive, Italian. He said, I cannot believe how good you look. I cannot believe it. Anita, that was his wife. Come here, you got to see this. You should have seen him 2 months ago. And it was true. I had made a lot of progress. And at the time, of course, oh my gosh, I was on cloud 9. I never felt so good. And I thought, whoa, am I motivated to keep doing this? Now, at age 65, looking back, what happened? Why that big change? One thing is something called muscle memory. Muscle memory means if you, just in layman's terms, if you do something and you get good at it, you get proficient, and then you stop doing it for a long period of time. Let's take riding a bicycle. If you ride a bicycle throughout childhood, and then you don't ride a bike for 10 years, and then you're with friends, and you're down at the beach, and you rent a bike. Maybe the first 5 to 15 minutes, you're a little bit wobbly. But eventually, within half an hour, you're back to where you were 10 years ago because of muscle memory. If you had never ridden a bike and you go at age 35 and get on one, you're not going to be within 30 minutes riding a bike comfortably, but because you don't have the muscle memory. And Franco thought he didn't know about those 3 years when I was totally into bodybuilding. And I didn't realize about muscle memory why I made so much progress so rapidly. But that's what was going on. So then he said, within I kept seeing him every couple months, and we became friends. And then Arnold, I would see at World. I switched to World Gym. Joe Gold founded the original Gold's Gym. He was a welder. He made great equipment, and it wasn't expensive, and it was just a wonderful atmosphere for working out. Joe then sold Gold's Gym, went off to I think he'd been a merchant marine. He went off to sea, and he came back and was kind of bored, and he started World Gym. And this was 1978. I signed up at World Gym, and this was now 81. I was going seriously because of Franco. And I would see Arnold almost every morning at World Gym. And Arnold couldn't have been nicer. We went to breakfast a few times. I asked him advice before I bought my first house. And he always, he was very sensible. Like I was thinking about buying a house in Westchester near our old office near the airport. And he said, well, if I were thinking about that, I would drive my car over maybe at 5 o'clock some morning, park in front of the house or near it, and keep the windows down and just listen for airplane noise. And if that bothers you, don't buy it. If it doesn't bother you, then it's a good test. I was very intrigued by that's the way he approaches things. I remember when I was at the Los Angeles Times, and I invited Arnold into the executive dining room, and he was telling me that he owned all these apartment buildings in Santa Monica. And I said, Arnold, I gotta, you came over here 10 years ago, not knowing English, an Austrian farm boy, no education, and now you're a multimillionaire. You own apartment buildings. I grew up, with a lot of advantages. Went to college, started getting a master's degree, and work now as an executive at the Los Angeles Times. I would be terrified to own an apartment building in Santa Monica. What if people call and say, hey, my plumbing broke on Sunday night when I don't want to be disturbed? And he said, oh, you can't look at life that way. You just hire a property manager and you tell them, and then when the people leave, you slap on a coat of paint and get somebody else in. His whole perspective was big perspective. We can do it. So I learned a lot from him and was very inspired by all that. As time went on, now I'm working out. This was a picture Franco took. That was from the old days. I love this sort of before and after. But you see, on the perseverance thing, I quit when I was probably 14 then. And you could see how I was actually getting little muscles, and if I had stuck with it then, I could have looked like that at maybe 16. But I didn't. I gave up and then came back. So that's the point about perseverance. That whole thing of grit we heard yesterday. You've got to hang in there because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. As long as you keep coming back, you have a chance. All right. As I was working out, I was in New York. I was working out at a gym, and I ran into my old friend Rock Stonewall. One of the points I wanted to make is it was back in the 1950s in Chicago. It was fairly racist. There's no denying that. And a lot of my friends' parents said that they thought my parents were nuts allowing me to go down and hang out with a black guy. And my father, who grew up on a farm in Minnesota, he just did not have a prejudiced bone in his body and was very anti-racism of any kind. And he would just drill that into us. And for me, I didn't care if Rock was black or green or blue. I just wanted muscles. That's all I cared about. So now I'm in my early 80s, an executive at the LA Times, younger than Jack is now, and I run into Rock at Mid-City Health Club, or Mid-City Gym, Mid-City Health Club it was called, and then he was working at a health club, or a health food store, so I came over to it, and he suggested we pose like this, I don't know why. In any event, he had some health problems and died at 54. It was kind of a sad story, and that actually relates to something that the bodybuilding has done for me now, is I want to use it to live, my goal is to live to 98 in good health, with a clear mind, lots of love, and excited about life. Just as I am today, just as I was then. And I set these as goals. So, if we go forward, at that time, you can see I was just making progress. This is working with Franco. Then at some point, there was this five-time Mr. Universe fellow, Bertil Fox, who came up to me and said, would you like to be my training partner? And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, you're bench pressing 500 pounds. I'm bench pressing 200 pounds. How are we going to spend all day taking the legs off? He said, no, it's mostly pins. They have several benches. Plus, let's find a third person. There'll be 3 of us. And that way you guys can both help me and so on. So I went up to this guy. He had blonde hair. I've seen him a lot in the gym. He was very quiet. He was working out. Introduced myself and said, would you like to work out with Bertil and me? And he said, no, I can't. It's too heavy. It's way too big a challenge. I said, I know. That's what I said. But you and I can work out together and we can help him. We can learn a lot. Come on. His name was Mike Myers. So Mike said, okay. So, and some of you know Mike worked at Creators as a salesman for a number of years. That's good dieting. We're dieting. We got these confused. Okay, there's Bertil. There's Mike. There's me. That's back in the early 80s. Now, Bertil's story was quite tragic. He wound up in getting into a fight with his girlfriend and her mother, and he shot both of them, and they died, and he's in St. Kitts, sentenced to life in prison. I do think that was, I personally think, because he was fundamentally, had a lot of kindness in him, but I think when those steroids and all the human growth hormone, all those chemicals can make you nuts. And I think that, I don't know any other explanation. It's a very tragic situation. But working out with Bertil and Mike, 2 hours a day, 6 days a week for a couple of years, I learned so much. Now, Joe Gold, he had kind of a wicked sense of humor. And he would tease everybody in the gym. And I remember once, like he used to call Arnold something like Fat Boy. But I remember one time he said to me, I was waiting for Bertil and Mike, he says, hey, how come Bertil keeps getting bigger and you and Mike keep getting smaller? And that was because, you see, if you're going to work out that hard, you really need the steroids or something to, okay. Now, as I said, my goal was to look as good as that fellow on the original cover I saw. And that was, his name is Guy Mirzik. He's French. He's in Monaco. I corresponded with him maybe 20 years ago. We talked on the phone. I told him, man, you were my hero. And in broken English, he told me he has a supplement that enables you to live for over 100, and did I want to buy some? He kept trying to sell it to me on the phone. I declined. I don't even know if he's still alive. But anyway, I had some pictures taken, and you can see I got there. Now, then what do you do after that? Once you reach a goal? So I kept a journal the whole time. Every year I have one of these for every single year. I keep one this year where I write in how much I worked out, or it's just to sort of keep track of everything I've done. I did the book with Franco for businessmen. I was featured in Muscle and Fitness magazine as a businessman who's achieved a lot of bodybuilding success. And then what happens is you get momentum. You see, now, to me, working out is like brushing my teeth. I have to work out. I have to work out at least 6 hours a week. And I've got my own workout with light weights, doing a lot of the same exercises Mike and Bertil and I did that I learned, or Franco taught me that I learned, or Rock Stonewall taught me 50 years ago. And now it's like if people say, oh, you should try this workout, you should try that, I'm like, no, I know what I'm doing, trust me. And like I said, I turned 65 this year. My doctor says I have the lipid profile of a 30-year-old. I feel terrific. I don't feel any of, I mean, the idea of retiring is just ridiculous. That's why I'm so excited about building a book publishing company. All right, now I look back and say, how do we apply this to Creators Publishing? What were the elements? Okay, it started with a burning desire. I saw that picture of Guy Mirzik, and that's what I wanted, ahead of everything. That burning desire. So from what we need, before this week is over, all of you need to figure out what is your burning desire within Creators Publishing, so that it really gets you excited, so it doesn't feel like work when you come here. All right, and the next step I did was to get expert advice and to immerse myself in the work, to learn as much as I could. by reading those magazines, talking to Rock Stonewall, talking to other Bill Sino, Sergio Oliva, and later Arnold Schwarzenegger and Franco Colombo and other people who became, they had what I wanted. So I would interview them. How did you do it? What do I do? What do I need to do? And so we need expert advice. That's something we have to think about. Should we hire the president of a book publishing company to come in and run this for us? Or do we just keep reading and learning on our own and keep experimenting? It's worth, examining, something we're sort of weighing back and forth. A third thing that helped lead to success was the environment. See, when I was in Chicago, when I quit, that environment was such that I had no control over my schedule. Nobody shared my interest. If I went, in those days, remember in the early 60s, if you went to a hotel, they never had a gym. No hotel ever had a gym. If you go to, let's say in my early 30s, I hadn't been in Santa Monica. Let's say I'd been in Chicago or Washington, D.C. or Baltimore or Richmond, some of the cities I lived in, and I wanted to work out. What do? You go to a holiday health club, you go to a YMCA, where it's like a dungeon, a basement. Nobody's training hard. People are talking about the TV show they saw last night. It's very hard to be focused and work out if you're in an environment that's negative or non-reinforcing. Now, in contrast, you go to Gold's Gym or World Gym, and you've got these people who all share the same interest, and everybody's working hard, everybody's focused. Then it's just so easy to go with the flow. Well, that's the kind of environment we need to create for creators publishing, where we're all on the same page and we're all working toward these successes, these bestsellers that we're going to continue to publish. Positive encouragement, that's huge. The Franco thing, I mean, I can't tell you what that meant. And so I think all of us need, and especially me, we need to look for positive, what you guys are doing right, and to praise. And but it can't just be, totally open-ended. I mean, it's one thing, Angeline paid a nice compliment to Melissa when Pete and Angeline and I were in my office yesterday. She said that when Melissa complimented her, it meant a lot because Melissa doesn't just compliment. So, I mean, that's important too. Goals. Let's talk about goals. Let's say that, that you were asked to be in a movie that you knew 30 million people were going to see, and you had to wear a bathing suit, and you had 30 days to get ready for it. Every one of us would diet, work out, we do everything possible in 30 days to look good in a bathing suit. So if you have a short-term goal like that, that's just so overwhelming and compelling, you don't have to think about it, you just do it. Now, you can't, that's a little bit artificial, and none of us probably is going to be asked to be in a movie seen by 30 million people in a month. But nonetheless, the more you can sort of play with your mind and set up short-term as well as long-term goals. I know this afternoon Jack has us, we're going to do vision boards where we envision what we want and so on. It's the same kind of thing. But my recommendation is do it big picture but also short-term. And that's what we need to do with our publishing. And then finally, what happens is you get the good habits. It just becomes like automatic. Like eating breakfast, like going to sleep, like brushing your teeth, like taking a shower, workouts, or success in publishing. Just like in syndication, we have that down. We have good habits for syndicated columnists, syndicated cartoonists. We know how to sell them, we know how to promote them, we know how to edit them, we know how to distribute them. And you just, sure we can fine tune, but once you get it down, then you get it down. I mean, this was 60 years old. So my workouts are just a part of my life. So that inspiration I had at age 12 and this journey to get to where I am, and my goal, like I say, is to live to 98 and continue working out 6 hours a week on average, and eating a sensible diet, and living a life with joy and love and feeling happy, healthy, and terrific. So that's it. Thank you. If anybody wants to ask questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Why do you think you lost the desire to work out at whatever point you did, 13, 14?
Well, I think it was feeling discouraged because my friends some of my friends had more muscle than me, and they never lifted a weight. But it was also the environment, and I didn't have control of my schedule. and I didn't understand goal setting and how I could take control. And you know, when you're 13, 14, 15, you're shoved off to high school and you don't really have a lot of control. So I think that was the answer, those things. Whereas in my 30s, I could control all of that. And I had a really busy job when I was doing the bodybuilding. So I had to, that got into time management. Like we talked, you know, about how do we do syndication and book publishing. We just have to organize our time that way. And different people do it different ways. Like Simone said she likes, or Pete said they like 1 day a week they devote to book publishing. Margot said she'd rather multitask and combine it within the week. Either way is fine. It's just whatever works for you.
I wonder if you could do a revised edition of the business person's guide to shaping up, you know, a more up-to-date one.
Talk to Franco. It's his book. I just contributed to
You
it.
contribute.
Yeah. So no, I don't. I've thought about this, but I don't want to write a book on how I work out because I think that's very personal. I remember years ago when Sarah was about. I think she was in college, and no, she was just out of college, and she had hired a personal trainer, and the personal trainer said you need 20 minutes of stretching or 20 minutes of cardio, then 20 minutes of stretching, then 20 minutes of weights or whatever it was to get the ideal workout. And she said, Dad, you've been working out your whole life. What do you think is the ideal workout? Or what is the best workout? And I thought about it, and I said, you know what, Sarah, the best workout's the one you like enough to keep doing it. That's the key. Like Brian, her husband, is a runner and a swimmer. He likes that. Jack, for a while, did triathlons. Now he does cross training or CrossFit or, you know, different workout. Whatever. Jessica does yoga. Sarah did yoga. Soul Cycle is her new thing. I think Sheila's doing Soul Cycle, or somebody is, or whatever. Kickboxing. We all do different things. Whatever you like enough to keep doing it. I think that's the most important thing, so you stay motivated. The way I judge a gym and a workout routine is by the clock. If 20 minutes feels like 5 hours, I got a bad routine or a bad gym. If 5 hours feels like 20 minutes, I got a great routine and a great gym. That's, you know, time flies when you're having fun, and if you don't look at the clock and you're having a good time and you feel terrific, then you know you've got a good routine and a good gym.
It's the same with work.
That's the same with life. Yes, time flies when you're having fun. And if you're not having fun and everything if things are dragging, then you know it's not good. But like I say, I could take the same story and apply it to Creator Syndicate. Starting with the burning desire, creating an environment that support where work, hard. I mean, all of this includes. This is an amazing amount of hard work. But if you're in the flow, you feel in the zone. It doesn't feel like hard work. It just feels natural. And that's what the environment we are trying to create at Creators. So, thank you very much.